Who is Frobo? Where did Frobo come from? These questions may at first appear inane, but in reality, this strange robot has a lot to do with the lore of Amphibia, including what kind of world this may even be. Amphibia is, yes, ostensibly a fantasy show, but it is a fantasy show with a lot of hidden sci-fi elements, and these elements do tell us a lot about the potential lore of the show. There is a long and proud history of fantasy worlds taking place after apocalypses. I am old enough to remember when everyone got on the late great critic Roger Ebert for saying in his review of the terrible Avatar movie that came out 11 years ago that Avatar takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. That is, of course, not correct, but you can kind of see why he thinks that, because there are a lot of these series that do, in fact, take place in a post-apocalyptic world. First thing that comes to mind is the world of Adventure Time, which appears to be this cute and friendly world, but is actually built on top of something extremely terrifying. However, my all-time favorite example of this is the world of Xenoblade Chronicles. When you start off in this world, you think it's just your ordinary garden variety fantasy world, but as you progress, more sci-fi elements are added. The entire second half of the game takes place on a continent that is very much sci-fi influence. It's more sci-fi than fantasy. Everything is mechanical, even the music. It's very much a departure from the world you're in at the start of the game. Which makes a lot more sense once you understand that this entire world, both halves, the organic half and the mechanical half, were created by a mad scientist who created this entire new world and made himself its god, and he is your main villain. It's really strange, and abstractly it sounds like it would be really cheesy, but it actually works in execution. And a big part of why it works is the steady transition throughout the game from more fantasy elements to more sci-fi elements, and we might start to see some version of that in Amphibia. My working hypothesis is that the robot, Frobo, is in some way connected to the giant bug monster whom King Andrias serves, as we saw at the end of the first temple. Now, you might say this theory sounds completely insane, but I don't think it is. It is true that it might not be correct, but it's not irrational. It's something that's supported by the evidence we have at hand. What do we thus far know about Frobo? Think of the ruins of despair, which we see the team visit in Season 2, early in Season 2. At first, these ruins appear to be nothing more than an exercise for clever visual design and the setting for some interesting character conflict. But in reality, there's a lot more to these ruins than that. They represent a very advanced level of technology, a level that we do not see elsewhere in this world. This is demonstrated by how they are able to create a very advanced robot like Frobo. Anne and Marcy know the words for interacting with this creature. They can say robot, but the citizens of Amphibia have no idea what to call a creature like this. They have no experience of robots in their everyday lives. To them, Frobo is just this strange mechanical monster. Think about these ruins as a whole. They are very advanced. They represent an extremely high level of technology. Hop-Hop has no contextualization for them. They're older than amphibian history. They're older than the frog settling this valley. Likely, they're many thousands of years old. And yet, there's conveyor belts and assembly lines. It's very much an industrial place. It's a factory, but a factory for what? What did it create, other than giant robots? And for what purpose? For what civilization? Now, there are those who believe that humans once existed in Amphibia, and that it is humans, ancient humans, who created these ruins. I find that theory pretty unlikely, considering how frog-centric these ruins are. It is much more likely, just thinking Occam's razor-like, that these ruins were built by an ancient frog-like civilization, not an ancient human civilization that no longer exists. Although, it's impossible to know for sure. It is possible, you could say, that they were created by a human civilization. Why then would this human civilization be gone? More importantly, why would they create robots that look like frogs? Now, it's possible, you could say, that the world was once like our world, but the humans who built these ruins were fascinated by frogs, and they went extinct because they wanted this world to be populated by giant amphibians. It's possible that this is all the work of one scientist, like in Xenoblade Chronicles, one mad man who's trying to take his obsession with frogs and other amphibians and force it on the world, to the extent that he's willing to wipe out human civilization in order to create a society ruled by amphibians. At this point, however, we're starting to transcend the limits of the facts which we currently possess. There is a possibility that the strange theory I'm proposing could be true, but it is rather unlikely. And thus, unless more evidence comes in supporting this theory, I'm going to drop it for now. Especially because there is a much, much more interesting connection that we can make here between Frobo, this innocuous-seeming robot, and the thousand-eyed bug creature whom King Andrias serves. We know very little about the creature at this juncture, so we cannot safely say that this creature, like Frobo, comes from the ruins of despair, or is even associated with these ruins. There is enough evidence, however, to tentatively suggest both Frobo and the thousand-eyed bug creature are remnants of a civilization that no longer exists in Amphibia. The bug creature, as many people noted, makes rather mechanical sounds instead of organic sounds. Its color palette is also something that vastly contrasts with that which we otherwise see in Amphibia. The bug creature is all blacks and grays and reds and oranges. These very industrial colors, as opposed to the rest of this world, which is more rural and agrarian. There's a lot of greens and blues and purples. I've seen fans characterize this thousand-eyed bug creature as something of an eldritch abomination, this pure Lovecraftian horror that cannot be comprehended, and I think that is a fair read on the creature, as there is no precedent for it in Amphibia as we currently know it. It's so different from everything else we've seen up to this point. Now, if this creature is from a more advanced civilization, it's reasonable to assume that this more advanced civilization is the same as the more advanced civilization we see in the ruins of despair. And if that is the case, which, again, we have every reason to believe it is, then we ought to be taking this more advanced civilization much more seriously. It's not just going to be part of the background lore. It's going to be a major part of the text, it seems like. Now here's a hot take. Maybe the creature, the thousand-eyed creature Andrias serves, is what destroyed this more advanced civilization. It's the reason why the civilization no longer exists. Maybe it used the powers of the Calamity box, which we know has the power to transport people between worlds, to transport itself to this world, and thus annihilate whatever civilization then existed, which is why there are only relics of that civilization. Or maybe it was built by that civilization, turned against its masters, and wants the Calamity box so it can transport itself out of this world and seek to take over some other world. It's possible that none of these theories are completely accurate, but I think it would be foolish to assert that there is nothing here to theorize about. Frobo, the ruins of despair from which Frobo comes, and the thousand-eyed bug creature King Andrias serves are somehow connected. These connections, I believe, will be revealed with the passing of time. Perhaps Frobo will help Anne and the planters and Marcy find some way to stop the thousand-eyed bug creature. I definitely think it is beneficial for our heroes that Frobo is on their side instead of being their adversary, especially when you think about how powerful Frobo can be. Polly, without meaning to, destroyed half the town of Wartwood through Frobo. We saw that power on full display during Friender Frobo. We had better hope it's used for good. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Amphibia. It's a really clever and thoughtful show, and I'm really interested to see where it goes from here. I'm really glad we've gotten to know all these wonderful characters, and I'm interested in learning much more about them, and in learning more about relative newcomers to the show like Frobo. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. I promise you that. Just give it a couple days. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.